Sunday's sermon was about friendship and how to nourish it. We talked a little bit about how to destroy friendship through gossip and slander and belittling people behind their back. But we spent most of our time talking about how to feed a friendship, and that we're really aiming for a certain sweetness that comes from earnest counsel, committed counsel that we give to each other, where we know where we stand and we know where the other person really is because we've cultivated a kind of sincere, candid way of talking with each other. To put it simply, we say what we really think, but we strive to say it in a way that is helpful to the other person rather than hurtful. And so friendships thrive when they're cultivated in this way. This sermon raised a ton of questions. I couldn't really get to any of them because I was too long-winded on Sunday. So here we go. We got 9 questions that we're going to go over here. And each one of them, they're so good that I wish I could do a video about each one. But you'll see there's a fair amount of overlap, and so I can only sketch answers to a lot of these. Here's the first one. On the point of covering, even when someone is wrong, what about exposing works of darkness, like Ephesians 5:11? Can't loyalty also be harmful? What we're talking about in terms of covering over people's issues, people's sins when they're wrong, and just sort of leaving that confidential, leaving them space to change. We're talking about the widest range of our relationships, the normal set of relationships. We're not talking about crime. We're not talking about violence. We're not talking about abuse in that sense. And so, indeed, what we often call loyalty when it's covering up crimes is actually conspiracy, so that's not a good thing. I wouldn't agree necessarily that we should use Ephesians 5:11 about this issue of exposing works of darkness. The reason is Ephesians 5:11 is saying that the light of the conduct of the whole church, the community of the church in a world of darkness, that conduct exposes the works of darkness. And so that's more the perspective that's coming from. It's not talking about being investigative reporters or something like that, where we're trying to bring people down and show how bad they really are. If you want a career in that, you're going to be a very busy person, but you won't have a lot of friends. So we do have to make a strong distinction between crime and abuse and violence and conspiring to cover up crimes versus the much, much broader range of normal things that we tend to talk about too much. People's vulnerabilities and sins and short-sightedness and blind spots. We need to be more cautious with each other about that. Next question. Where is the balance between offering committed counsel and deriding or belittling our neighbor? So I'm guessing that this is aimed at the fact that when you say something, it's committed from your point of view, but from the other person's point of view, it's not so much. It's not earnest. It's just belittling. It's mocking. It's mean-spirited, whatever it may be. What's the balance with this? So I would say one of the things we need always to think about is the goal of all of this, of generating sincere, candid ways of communicating with our friends. Remember, the goal is sweetness, that liveliness of recognition. Oh, That's what I've been missing. Oh, here's a new way of doing something. Here's something I didn't think about. Here's an angle on this I never thought of. That sweetness of realization. If you lose sight of that goal, you're going to attack people. And that's not the sort of counsel that is committed. It's more self-indulgent. So continuing along this line, what if, third question here, what if the other person is not at the place of being ready to hear yet? And what about when we are sincere but maybe wrong, when we are inserting our own interpretation and understanding with an incomplete picture, since we often can't know fully another person's situation? Well, if we keep in mind the goal of this candor that we're going for, sweetness, realization, freshness, vitality, then that makes me more modest in what I say, where I don't want to pronounce final judgments on things, within 2 weeks of knowing a person. I don't want to I don't want to be overconfident in claiming to know someone's motivations, which, frankly, I never do. And I'll just take that in. I never know what a person's motivations are. And so commenting on that kind of thing, I tend to just set it to one side. I don't know. I'm observing what I can see, and that's all. So I think these are very important considerations. What if we're wrong? What if we have a wrong interpretation of somebody? Well, then let's moderate what we say. Let's be candid about, here's what I perceive, here's what I'm feeling, here's how I'm receiving what you're doing or saying, and I don't know why you're doing it. Help me understand. You can make appeals more in that mode, and I really want to live there. I want to live in that zone of appealing to people and using that way of talking. Now, I just want to make one more comment about what if we're sincere in giving counsel but wrong? Oh, well, what do we do when we're mistaken about something? We go through the conversation, and we realize, I am mistaken about this person. I did not realize what was going on. And depending on the severity of our misjudgment and mistakes, then maybe we just say, I am completely wrong. And I apologize. I should not have said this to you. I shouldn't have brought this to you at all. I completely misperceived this whole situation, and I'm sorry. And we learn and we move on. Part of what I'm saying is, if you're afraid of being wrong, you'll never get it right. The only way we get it right is by the kind of iron sharpens iron clashes, where occasionally there are sparks, and then we sit back and say, okay, those were sparks we just saw there. Now, what are we going to do about that? And because we're friends and we're committed to each other, we need that ethic back. That ethic of saying, I can be wrong and we can still be friends, because apologies and learning and all of that kind of softening process, that's okay. That's really good for us. How do we discern, fourth question, when someone is telling us information to help us rather than to posture and show that they are better than us? It is sometimes difficult to receive criticism and not wonder if the person is genuinely trying to help. I think here we're looking at it more from the receiver of the earnest counsel, not so much the giver. And so when you're receiving this kind of counsel, which I do all the time, I don't know motivations, so I just tend to say, well, this is well motivated. Whatever, even if it's mistaken, even if it's wildly off, it's well motivated. So I'm going to receive it from that point of view, and I'm going to try to learn from it whatever I can. And I deal with people in that mode until proven otherwise by other witnesses. Okay? If somebody is really just kind of knifing you in the chest, as they say, instead of behind your back, they're just being mean. Well, you want to give it some time. Maybe they're just nervous, maybe they're insecure, maybe they're just no good at this and they're trying. Well, you give it some time, you give it some chances, and before you reach the conclusion, this is kind of malicious. There's something really off about this. And so that doesn't mean you give endless chances to a person who has no self-control over the way they use their mouth. You don't have an obligation to sit there and just take a whipping like that. But you just assume that it's well motivated and watch and wait. And I found that even when it's not well motivated, the best chance of appealing to that person to kind of get a grip on their out of control speech, the best way to win them over is by having given them chances. I will say this: when someone is in a pattern of malicious, abusive speech, we're talking about very, very deep heart issues, and the person, in my experience, rarely turns around. If this is you, I would just appeal to you, take note of this and take steps. Get counsel on this. If you kind of recognize yourself in the description of somebody who just, once you get started talking and criticizing somebody, you can't stop until you leave them kind of a puddle in front of you. No, you need to get help on this, and urgently, or you're going to alienate friends. You don't want to be that kind of thorn. Well, these questions, they go really deep, and but they do overlap here. Here's a question: what if our counsel and what we're thinking is off base, or not accurate, or maybe negative? It's risky. Is a similar question to what we've addressed before, and I would just say, do evaluate the counsel you want to give. I guess this is a good way to put this, maybe more directly than I said before. Before you give this earnest counsel, recognize that you can't do it impulsively. Earnest counsel is committed. If you're committed to being impulsive, that's another kind of problem. That's not a solution to anything. So don't be impulsive then. Take some time to evaluate your position and the counsel that you want to give, and modify accordingly. Because it is risky. It is very difficult. How does a high tolerance for clashes and disagreements apply to major differences in theological beliefs? Well, it applies directly. The only way that we have for dealing with theological beliefs and differences about them is to debate them. And I use the word debate, even though it's kind of taken on a negative connotation, but I want to use it in this sense of a highly disciplined back and forth, point to point, where you're having a focused argument and you're evaluating and criticizing evidence and you're staying on point. A debate is not what we have on media today, which is basically insult humor. Insult humor is not an argument. debating is about finding flaws. It is a negative, critical process. And so it is best done candidly, and it is best done in a very disciplined way. I would say if you find that you simply cannot do this, that you lose proportion of the debate, and you can't stay within bounds, you kind of your fuse is too short. If that's the case, then you need to exercise real caution about what debates you get into, if any. And the same would apply to politics. But you're going for candor within limits, and the limits are very important. Or maybe to put it more bluntly, civility is always an important and critical value. To lose civility, even in high-stakes issues, especially in high-stakes issues, to lose civility is to lose the ability to team up and solve problems later. Lessons for our whole society on this, because we're deep into these problems. Another question. Can't iron also dull iron if it is simply smashed against each other rather than being skillfully and deliberately used to sharpen by the friction? Do we in our friendships need to be careful in making sure that we don't bang and hack, but rather delicately sharpening? Both make sparks, but one is counterproductive. I would say that is a very good way of framing the issue of debate. As I said, insult humor is not debate. That's just people banging on each other and clubbing each other. It's blunt force. It's not sharpening. And so the sharpening of debate is the sharpening of precision. It's the sharpening of insight against insight, and making perception for both participants or all participants keener. And so I would just emphasize again, civility is how we do that. Another question related to this: when James 3 talks about the taming of the tongue, how does that apply to this topic? Are there things we should not say in our friendships in order to avoid doing harm? I should really get my Bible. Yes, although I would quibble over the idea of not saying things, or the things we should avoid saying. I wouldn't put it that way. I would say that there are things that we should really question saying, and once we question them, we should kind of dial it back. Where we find that our perceptions are contributing to a sort of violent approach to a disagreement, or an insulting approach to disagreement, then we really need to dial back the insult and withhold, as far as we can, giving offense. But I do not think that James 3 on taming the tongue is counseling us to not say what we think. It's just saying, look, your tongue releases what is in your heart, and if what is in your heart is fire, you're going to do damage. And so that's the warning of James 3. And I want to point your attention to the end of James 3. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. Meekness, not flimsy, not weak, not flabby, spineless. Meek being under control, disciplined, contained. limited in its application. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. Well, there's a strong word. And so when we talk about confronting somebody, here's a pastor, James, confronting his congregation and saying, what is in you, if you're exhibiting bitter jealousy, is from demons. And now, that's a sharp confrontation. It's needed, too. And so maybe it's hurtful, maybe it's offensive, maybe somebody in James's church got up and stormed out, but it still needed to be said. And you can look at his directions for wisdom. Where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice, more strong language. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Follow that. In giving earnest counsel, James 3 not only tells you what not to do, it gives you a good checklist for what earnest counsel is when it's under control. Final question in this batch. When counsel is heard and perhaps rejected as only a difference of opinion, well, sometimes sharp disagreements are just a difference of opinion. And sometimes we just got to let that ride. I mean, there's the phrase agree to disagree, but there's also an important function in this. When we disagree over matters of opinion, and we state those disagreements clearly, we have a marker. And over time, we can go back to that marker and we can say, we argued about this, but you were right. And that's a very important thing to feed a friendship over years and even decades sometimes, where we're able to say, yeah, we had a difference of opinion. My opinion was wrong and yours was correct. And so, again, I wouldn't be afraid of letting these disagreements happen within a contained and self-controlled way, because they leave markers down, and eventually we might discover who was right, if anybody was. Maybe you discover when you go back to that marker, we were both wrong. We were so far off, we weren't even asking the right questions. That happens too. There's another question from this sermon that I will treat in a second video, but thank you for these perceptive and insightful questions.